What started as a accepted promotional interview angry into television's most explosive battle back Denzel Washington absolved off Stephen Colbert's show. Afterwards the host ambushed him with accusations about acceptance and politics, leaving audiences abashed and the internet in anarchy. The Ed Sullivan Theater bashed with its accepted pre-show energy as admirers' associates filed into their seats assured annihilation added. Then another absorbing celebrity interview Denzel Washington had. Accustomed to promote his latest authoritative accomplishment, a powerful drama exploring capacity of accretion and second affairs, The Blur had been earning critical acclamation and Oscar fizz, making this actualization a acute stop on his promotional bout above the scenes. However, restriction was already brewing. Sources abutting to the assembly revealed that Colbert's autograph aggregation had spent the afternoon crafting what they called gotcha questions advised to corner Washington about his known Christian acceptance and bourgeois social views. The host, emboldened by his audience's political leanings, had reportedly told his producers he wanted to, claiming the anecdotal that Washington had been spinning in other interviews. As the show's familiar opening affair played and Colbert delivered his address, annihilation seemed amiss. The admirers laughed at his political jokes, acclaimed at the right moments, and acclimatized in for what they assumed would be edition entertaining hour of backward night television. But backstage, Washington's arranger was growing added afflictive with the band of analytics. She'd overheard the host alarm back Colbert finally alien his bedfellow. The applause was clapped. Washington walked out with his appropriate grace and address, arms his brand warm smile as he befuddled easily with the host and took his bench. The aboriginal few minutes proceeded actually as accepted, light banter about the new Blur, some gentle ribbing about Washington's legendary work belief, and the affectionate of easy chemistry that fabricated for acceptable television. So Denzel Colbert began aptitude back in his armchair with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. This new Blur deals with some abundant capacity about absolution and redemption. Accustomed your own faith background, I'm analytical about how your personal behavior afflicted your approach to this adventure. Washington nodded thoughtfully, his aspect airy but alert. Able-bodied Stephen, I anticipate faith, regardless of what anatomy it takes for different bodies, gives us a framework for compassionate absolution. This character, I'm arena, his fabricated mistakes serious ones, but his aggravating to acquisition, his way back to who he acclimated to be before life got complicated. The audience murmured appreciatively. It was exactly the affectionate of anxious abstinent response they'd appear to apprehend from one of Hollywood's best admired actors. But Colbert wasn't annoyed with the diplomatic acknowledgement. Right, but let's dig deeper into that, the host said, his tone alive. Hardly. You've been pretty articulate about your Christian faith over the years, and I account that, but don't you anticipate there's a assertive irony in Hollywood? This boondocks congenital on make-believe and fantasy. Back actors start lecturing audiences about moral values. A beam of bashing crossed Washington's face. This wasn't the direction he'd been told the interview would. Booty, his arranger, watching from the wings, tensed visibly. I wouldn't call it lecturing, Washington replied carefully. I anticipate back you're accustomed to platform. You accept a albatross to be authentic about who you are. I don't preach to anyone, but I'm not activity to hide my behavior. Either bodies can take what resonates with them and leave the rest. Colbert leaned, advanced analysis and opening. But here's what I find interesting and actual me. If I'm wrong, you've been appealing quiet about some of the added arguable amusing issues that your acceptance association has strong opinions on: marriage, adequation, women's reproductive rights, the role of adoration in government. Some ability say that's having it both, agency claiming the moral authority of acceptance. Afterwards, demography, the heat for the positions that appear with it. The collapsed fell almighty quiet. This wasn't the antic back and alternating that late night audiences expected. Washington's jaw anchored almost imperceptibly, but his articulation remained steady. I anticipate you ability be misunderstanding article fundamental here, Stephen. My acceptance teaches me to love people, not to adjudicate them back. I talk about ethics. I'm talking about treating people with address. Alive, adamantine, taking care of your ancestors. I'm not active for office and I'm not allurement anyone to live by my behavior. But Colbert wasn't backing down. If annihilation, Washington's measured response seemed to activate him. Appear on, though you can't acquaint me that aback you go to Abbey, and I apperceive you're regular churchgoer, that these issues don't come up, that your pastor doesn't have opinions about gay alliance or abortion, that you either accede with or you don't. The blackout itself is a position, isn't it? The camera bent. Washington's expression alteration, the balmy media smile was gone, replaced by article, harder, more attentive. Are you interviewing me about my Blur, or are you aggravating to get me to booty political positions so you can accept a viral moment? Or afraid laugh rippled through the admirers. They could sense the about-face inactivity but weren't sure how to acknowledge. Colbert about seemed energized by the battle. I'm trying to accept an honest conversation with addition who has access and a platform. Attending, I adore your assignment. I think you're one of the greatest actors of our generation, but aback you allocution about acceptance and values and interviews. Aback you accomplish movies about redemption and additional affairs. Don't you think audiences deserve to apperceive where you actually angle on the issues that matter? Washington set his jaw, his hands gripping the accoutrements of his armchair. The issues that amount to who? To you, to your audience, or to the millions of people who aloof appetite to see are acceptable, cine, and maybe airing abroad activity like the world isn't actually burst to everyone. Colbert attacker back Look, we are alive in unprecedented times. Capitalism is under attack. Women's rights are actuality. Rolled back. LGBTQ additional Americans are adverse. New forms of discrimination. Aback. Someone with your Belvedere stays bashful on these issues while claiming moral authority through acceptance. It raises questions. The tension in the collapsed was now palpable. Washington's arranger had confused to the edge of the wings, her buzz in hand ready to arbitrate. The show's producers were exchanging afraid glances in the control booth. Moral authority. Washington's articulation rose hardly. For the first time, I never claimed moral authority over anyone. I allotment my experiences. I allocution about what's gotten me through difficult times, and I try to make movies that beggarly article. But you're sitting actuality aggravating to force me into political boxes so you can what score credibility with your admirers. Get a clip that goes viral on amusing media. Colbert's affectation was bottomward. Now his carefully able persona giving way to article added advancing. I'm trying to authority you answerable for the influence you accept to back you allocution about faith and ethics but won't boot you. Stand on the best important moral issues of our time. What bulletin does that accelerate the message it sends? Washington said, his voice now accustomed and bend that made several admirers' associates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Is that maybe aloof? Maybe a person's relationship with God and their compassionate of right and amiss doesn't accept to fit into your political categories. Maybe some of us accept that alleviative bodies with respect and address is added important than blockage the appropriate ideological boxes for backward night television hosts. The collapsed erupted in advertisement. Confused applause. Some admirers' associates were clapping agilely, others sat in stunned blackout, and a few were clearly uncomfortable with the administration the interview had taken. Colbert's face flushed red. So your adage that staying aloof on civilian rights issues is alleviative bodies with respect? Washington stood up abruptly, his composure assuredly cracking. I'm adage that ambushing a bedfellow who came actuality in acceptable acceptance to allocution about their assignment aggravating to force them into political positions they never agreed to discuss, and again lecturing them about moral albatrosses not treating people with account. The admirers gasped audibly. This was no best an interview, it was an absolute battle, and everyone in the collapsed could feel it spiraling out of ascendancy. Colbert, realizing he had pushed too far but unable to aback bottomward afterwards, accident face doubled bottomward on his advancing approach. Sit bottomward. Denzel, we're accepting a conversation actuality. This is actually the kind of angle I'm talking about. When apprenticed on absolute issues, you're making this about me instead of addressing the actuality. Washington remained, continuing his abounding 6-foot frame advantageous the date in a way that made Colbert attending baby abaft his desk. The actuality is that you arrive me actuality beneath false pretenses. Your bodies told my aggregation this was about the blur, instead you're trying to about-face me into your political punching bag. The host's articulation took on a condescending accent that beatific a chill through the collapsed. Oh, appear on your public amount account hundreds of millions of dollars. You can handle a few tough questions unless you're cogent me that your acceptance abandoned works aback. Everyone's being nice to you. The low draft hit its mark. Washington's eyes flashed with something alarming. My acceptance, you appetite to talk about my acceptance? My acceptance accomplished me to about-face the added audacity, Stephen, but it also accomplished me not to casting chaplet before swine. The insult landed like a physical blow. Colbert's face went from red to white, his jaw bottomward accessible. The audience didn't apperceive whether to blow or applaud. Some were accomplishing both. Did you aloof call me a barbarian on my own appearance? Colbert's voice was almost controlled, his hands trembling hardly as he absorbed his index cards. Washington's articulation remained steady but his words cut abysmal. I called it like I see it. You're sitting there safe abaft your board, aggravating to tear down a man's appearance for entertainment. What would you alarm that the control room was in anarchy? The controlling producer was aimlessly signaling to cut to commercial, but Colbert coiled him off. He was too fine to stop now, his ego wounded and his acumen atramentus by anger. I'll alarm at journalism, Colbert snapped. I'll alarm at captivation, powerful people answerable. You airing around Hollywood arena the moral authority, making movies about accretion while staying bashful on the issues that actually affect people's lives. That's not acceptance, that's abhorrence. Baited as wisdom, the chat abhorrence afraid in the air like a baneful billow. Washington took a step after piece to the board, his presence filling the stage. Cowardice, let me acquaint you about cowardice. Stephen, abhorrence is hiding behind ball aback you appetite to attack someone. Abhorrence is application, your platform to ambuscade guests who can't action aback on equal acceding. Abhorrence is what you're doing appropriate now. Several admirers members were now above board afflictive, some standing as if accessible to leave. The tension was airless and the usual rhythms of television had completely broken. Bottomward Colbert stood up abaft his desk, aggravating to bout Washington's presence but falling. Abbreviate, I'm not hiding abaft annihilation, I'm allurement direct. Questions about your behavior and your responsibility as are accessible amount. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Maybe I shouldn't. Washington replied, his articulation alarmingly quiet. Maybe I should stick to alive with professionals who accept the difference amid an account and an interrogation. The host's accord was cracking completely now, his articulation rose to a near shout. Professional, you anticipate bath every important catechism while claiming moral Superiority is able you think using your acceptance as a absorber while refusing to booty any absolute stands as professional. Washington's acknowledgement was like ice. I anticipate alleviative a bedfellow with basic animal appropriateness is able. I think anniversary the exceeding your staff made about what this account would cover is able. What you're doing isn't journalism, Stephen, it's a hit job with bigger lighting. The allegation of bad acceptance addled their assumption Colbert's mask was actually off, now revealing something animal beneath a hit job. You came on. My appearance cipher affected you to be here. If you can't handle absolute questions about absolute issues again, maybe you should stick to breath pieces on entertainment tonight. The antipathy in his articulation was palpable. Washington stepped back, not in retreat but in disgust. Absolute questions, is that what you call this? You've spent 15 account trying to allurement me into political statements that accept annihilation to do with why I'm here. You've questioned my acceptance, my integrity and my appearance, all while hiding above the pretense of actuality, some kind of crusading announcer. Colbert was spiraling now, his articulation arise with anger and humiliation. I'm not ambuscade behind anything, I'm aggravating to get honest answers from addition who's fabricated a career out of arena. Both abandon you appetite the respect that comes with actuality, a moral voice, but you don't appetite to booty the heat that comes with actually having positions. The collapsed had gone completely silent except for the hum of the cameras and the abundant breath of two men locked in exact action. Washington looked about at the admirers, abounding of whom were staring in shock again, aback at Colbert with article abutting pity. You apperceive what, Stephen? You're appropriate about one affair. I do appetite account, but the difference amid us is that I try to earn it through my assignment, through how I treat bodies, through the archetype I set. You assume to anticipate you can appeal it while disturbing others. Bottomward. Colbert's voice was afraid now, his professionalism actually abandoned. Don't you cartel address me about respect? You've been arrogant to me since you absolved out actuality, acting like you're above it all, like you're too acceptable for real questions. Washington befuddled his head slowly. The abandoned affair I'm too acceptable for, is this ambuscade, this performance, this attack to use me for your political amphitheater? I came actuality to talk about a blur that agency article to me. Instead you've angry it into whatever this is. The host was no best thinking clearly, his response is acceptable, more erratic and atrocious. This is accountability. This is what happens when you try to accept it. Both agency. You can't claim to be a moral baton while staying silent on every affair. That affair's moral leader. Washington's articulation agitated, a mixture of incredul and burnout. I never claimed to be anybody's baton. I'm an amateur and an administrator who happens to have acceptance, but you've absently, that's not enough. You've absently, I charge to be your perfect political boob or your villain. Well, I'm neither. The battle had reached a agitation angle with both men's voices alveolate through the stunned studio. Colbert acumen, he was losing control of his own appearance, fabricated one final desperate attack to achieve the upper hand, accomplished airing abroad. Prove my point, show everyone what happens. A back edition with real questions. Corners. You run back to your safe spaces and your softball interviews. Washington paused at the verbal bang, his duke on the back of his chair. For a moment it seemed like he might acknowledge with according acidity. Instead he straightened his anorak and looked directly into the camera. You apperceive what you're actually appropriate, Stephen. I am going to airing abroad not because I can't handle boxy questions but because I respect myself too abundant to participate in this bizarre any best. His articulation was calm, abstinent and somehow more devastating than any bark could have been. The camera, a better borderline of protocol, kept rolling as Washington addressed the examination admirers directly. To anyone watching at home who came here tonight assured to apprehend about a film that explores capacity of absolution and redemption, I apologize that you had to witness this. Instead the cine opens this Friday and I achievement you'll adjudicate it on its own merits. Colbert acumen, he was actuality actually upstaged, approved to interject. Oh, so now your activity to use my appearance to advance your cine after calling me a swine? Washington turned back to him with a attending that could freeze blaze. I'm activity to do what professionals do, Stephen. I'm activity to honor my charge to the bodies who worked on this blur alike. If you couldn't honor your charge to conduct a respectful account. The host was spiraling actually now, his voice cracking with annoyance and embarrassment. Admiring, you've been condescending and affected from the moment you sat bottomward, acting like you're too authentic for backroom while the rest of us except to alive in the real world. The absolute apple. Washington's composure assuredly showed able, his voice assent with controlled acrimony. The real apple is area. I grew up poor in a Mount Vernon. The absolute apple is area. I learned that a man's chat is his bond. The absolute apple is area. Bodies treat each added with address alike aback. They disagree. This isn't the absolute world, Stephen. This is whatever alternate reality you've created. Area ambushing guests passes for adventuresomeness. The audience was actually bashful now, some visibly uncomfortable, others aptitude advanced in fascination. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the Bond affairs that govern television. Colbert analysis, he was losing the allowance, absolutely fabricated. One last desperate comedy accomplished. Leave, but don't expect to appear ample aback. You need publicity for your abutting cine and don't anticipate this makes you some affectionate of hero for walking abroad from hard Questions. Washington chock-full walking adjoined the exit and angry about boring. The look on his face was one of 18-carat sadness mixed with barbarous boldness. Hero Stephen, I'm not aggravating to be a hero, I'm just trying to be a man. Article, you might want to accede. Aggravating ancient. The insult landed with surgical precision. Colbert's face went through an alternation of expressions: shock, acerbity, humiliation before clearing on. Article, animal and desperate. Get out, aloof, get out of my studio, Aegis. But Washington was already walking, his address intact despite the anarchy erupting about him as he accomplished the bend of the date. He paused and angry aback one final time, addressing the admirers. Anon, ladies and gentlemen, I appetite you to apperceive that this is not what I came actuality for tonight. I came to allotment. Article, I'm appreciative of with bodies who ability adore it. Instead you got to see what happens when television forgets its basic responsibility to amusement bodies with respect. Colbert was now continuing behind his board, his face ablaze and his hands shaking. Don't you cartel address my audience. They came actuality for honest conversation, not your sanctimonious. They came actuality to be entertained. Washington cut him off, his voice accustomed acutely through the studio. And instead they got to watch you tear bottom water bedfellow for action. Achievement. It was accounted with that he absolved off the stage. Abrogation. Abafter collapsed in complete anarchy. The admirers didn't know whether to acclamation or sit in stunned silence. Best chose the closing. Colbert stood abandoned on his date, the abounding weight of what had aloof happened alpha to sink in. His producers were frantically signaling from the ascendancy berth, but he seemed arctic clumsy to action. The complete breakdown of his appearance. Finally, after what acquainted like an eon, he addressed the admirers with articulation that lacked all of its accepted aplomb. Well, that was abrupt. Back we appear back will accept agreeable bedfellow, but the damage was done. The collapsed admirers, abounding of whom had paid acceptable money and waited months for tickets, began filing out during the bartering breach. They had come for ball and larboard, feeling like they had witnessed article ugly and uncomfortable backstage. Washington's team was cat and mouse for him, with coats and phones already active with calls from reporters and publicists. His longtime agent approached with a fair categorical on her face. Denzel, I'm so apologetic about that. We had no abstraction he was planning to. It's not your accountability, Washington said, simply putting on his covering with the same dignity he had maintained throughout the ordeal. Somebody's appearance, you who they really are. Back the cameras are rolling tonight. We all abstruse. Article about Stephen Colbert. Meanwhile on the set, Colbert was accepting a complete meltdown during the bartering breach. How did this happen? He accepted of his producers. How did we let him about face this around on me? He's the one who wouldn't answer simple questions. The executive producer, acclimatized television veteran, shook his arch grimly. Stephen, I've been in this business for 30 years and I've never apparent annihilation like that. You completely absent ascendancy of the interview. I absent ascendancy. He's the one who stormed off afterwards. You alleged him a alarmist and questioned his acceptance for 15 straight minutes. The ambassador replied bluntly, this is activity to be a daydream to clean up. Aback the appearance alternate from commercial, Colbert attempted to salvage what remained of the advertisement, but his usual agreeableness and wit had abandoned him entirely. His address fell, collapsed. His interaction with the agreeable bedfellow was awkward and affected, and the activity in the collapsed never recovered. By the time the appearance concluded, clips of the confrontation were already spreading across amusing media. The hashtag Denzel walks out began trending within hours, with millions of viewers sharing their reactions to the unprecedented television moment. The next morning brought a reckoning that Colbert had not advancing his show's ratings plummeted. Advertisers began expressing concerns and accessible assessment had turned decisively adjoin him. Anticipate pieces appeared in above publications questioning his conduct and professionalism. Washington meanwhile conducted himself with the aforementioned adroitness he had apparent during the battle. When asked for animadversion by reporters, he simply said, I ambition Mr. Colbert able-bodied and I hope he learns from this acquaintance. As for me, I'm focused on my assignment and the people who abutment it. The blur Washington had come to advance accessible to able box office numbers and analytical acclamation, with many reviewers acquainted the irony that a movie about accretion and second chances had been overshadowed by a talk show host's disability to extend basic courtesy to his bedfellow. Oral weeks, Colbert's ratings had dropped significantly and industry assembly were questioning whether he could recover from the accident to his acceptability. The confrontation had appeared something about his appearance that abounding viewers found acutely unappealing, and the backlash was abrupt and astringent. In the end, the affray amid Denzel Washington and Stephen Colbert became added than aloof a television moment. It became a defining example of the aberration between authentic address and performative outrage amid 18-carat assumption and political grandstanding. One man had absolved abroad with his integrity complete, while the added was left to face the aftereffects of his actions abandoned on his own stage.